Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I can.
Tom?
It's a
Eleanor.
little bit out of the way.
Oh.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Before we say anything else, we want you to know that we are going to encourage lots of good participation this evening, and the format will be really interesting. Ellen is going to read 3 different passages from the book, and after each, we will give you a chance to comment, question, whatever you would like to do, and we, again, really encourage that participation. One sitting beside me, as you know, is the author of the book. And this evening's presentation is being recorded. My name is Marilyn Herring, and Ellen and I were just laughing because we go back 60 years to St. Louis. And we knew each other there. After college, for 38 years, for a large part of it, well, the first part of it was English, and actually the longer part of it was teaching senior English. I would like to say publicly and sincerely that I was absolutely about that. I'm good friends with a number of them and I'm very happy. The author, Sister Ellen Doyle, has had a varied career in education. Our paths crossed here, but Ellen went on to do a wide variety of educational pursuits. Currently, she is on the board of Ursuline Academy and loves that work. So once again, just to repeat the format for this evening, Ellen is going to read some segments from the book, and then we encourage lots of good participation, just like English class.
I have to confess that I just finished reading Lessons in Chemistry last night. And any of you who know what that book is about, it's like, oh my gosh. It felt like a past life in many ways, but I secretly wanted to be an English teacher all along. So Marilyn somehow went from French to English, and I somehow was able to gather these precious words into this book after I don't know, 25 years of working on it. I started putting it together about 25 years ago. So we're going to, I'll point out the sections if you would like to follow, but feel free to just listen and notice what you might want to comment on or ask questions about or add your own insights to. But I said to Ryan and, is it Colin? Yeah, Ryan and Colin, I asked them how old they were when they wrote their first letter, and they were about the same age as I was when I wrote my first letter. So writing letters is the theme, as is connecting across generations. So this is from the preface. I was just 18 when I received my first letter from Uncle Stanley, great Uncle Stanley. The extraordinary gift was that he took me seriously, responding quickly to the letter I wrote him from Nags Head, North Carolina, where I was on vacation with my family that last summer before I left home. Thus began a correspondence that would last 18 years and 72 seasons, ending with his death at age 86, just as summer was about to turn toward autumn. A large, spirited, tall man with a thick crop of white hair, a ruddy face, and a boisterous Irish laugh Uncle Stanley drew young and old alike into his warm hugs and engaging conversation. But it was through the written word, mostly letters, that he established and deepened relationships that would enrich the lives of dozens of correspondents, as well as his own. Educated in Europe, this priest son of Irish immigrants was as intensely interested in the world, its religions, politics, art, and literature as he was in the developing faith, relationships, professional life, and vocation of this grandniece of his. 50 years younger than he, I intuitively knew that my eternal questions, youthful idealism, joys and sorrows would be safe in his keeping. What I couldn't have known was that our relationship would develop into one where his own tentative thoughts and feelings around aging, retirement, and death were safe with me. Nor that in the several decades since his death, I would discover how deeply his love and wisdom has infused my life with meaning and joy. And we turn to the next page. A typical Uncle Stanley letter, as they came to be called by my friends, and Patsy was there when the first letter came, so I don't know if you remember that day, but they got passed around in the visit. So a typical Uncle Stanley letter, as they came to be called by my friends, was 3 typed, single-spaced pages of plain white paper. The early ones, written in the days of optional domestic airmail at a higher rate, included the words "fly it" on the corner of the envelope, as if his bold, black, exuberant handwriting could add urgency to the airmail stamp and put his letter in my hands sooner. In those days, snail mail at the standard postal rate traveled in a truck. It's true. Airmail at a higher rate traveled by plane and arrived sooner. That first letter arrived 3 weeks before I left home to enter the Ursulines of Brown County Convent in St. Martin, Ohio, where I would spend my novitiate in training to become a nun. Over the years and seasons of our correspondence, I would receive 200 of these letters. Each one contained musings on his own busy life, stories of people he cared about, rants against inclement weather, enthusiasm for the changing church and nation, reflections on his extensive reading, and always a wise and loving response to my own sharing. I want to go to the next page, at the bottom of the next page now, to connect it to my work. Much later, in my early 40s and about the midpoint of my 11-year tenure as president of Chatfield College, I was wrestling with whether the time had come to move on from the college. Tired and discouraged, I wondered if I had given all I had to give. It was Ash Wednesday evening, and for the first time in my life, I chose to skip church services so I could draw on Uncle Stanley's wisdom. He had been dead about 10 years. For the first time in my life, I reread a portion of his letters, the ones closest to his death. Although he died 3 months before I accepted the call to leadership at Chatfield, Uncle Stanley lifted up for me, in the words of his last 35 letters, just what I needed to face the challenges before me with confidence and courage. And then down at the bottom of that page. Even Uncle Stanley asked me if I wanted my letters back. He saved all my letters, and I chose not to take my letters. And that's explained in the book. And it freed me to have my writing be from now, not from when I was in my 20s and 30s, which I don't have any regrets. But the challenge in writing this book was about making it contemporary to people that didn't know me, didn't know Uncle Stanley, different generations. And my vision is that people will want to connect across generations, whether it's by letter or by FaceTime or whatever way, to talk about things that really matter. And that's what I hope that the book will be. And that people who read the book will pass it on to other people who have that idea too. Now, at the age Uncle Stanley was when he answered my first letter to him, I am inviting you to witness how an aging priest and his young niece companioned one another into life. My own letters, written to you, emerged from his letters to me long ago, and from my hope that our letters motivate you to reach out to a niece, an uncle, a grandchild, a mentor, to share your own pondering about life across 1 or 2 generations and your own seasons. As private as love letters and almost as public as his weekly London tablet, his treasured words in our loving relationship now seem meant for others. Even so, I timidly hold these words close to my own heart, knowing they reveal my soul and that of the great uncle who loved me.
I'm just going to share why I would look forward each evening to reading a little bit of this book. I found it to be so positive and so loving and so sincere. And if you spent any portion of your day watching the news or listening to any kind of a report from our just terribly wounded world, this was my haven at night. I told Ellen this, that I would pick this up and love just flowed back and forth in those words. And I really like that preface to the book, so you get an idea of the age difference. Now, I'd love to hear any response you might have to what Ellen read, or maybe some thoughts that were going through your mind.
Yeah. I felt the same way you did, Marilyn. I felt it was just a comforting time, but it also brought up the question of, with the social media being what it is and being erased, and so many people, younger people, are going to lose that contact with older grandparents, aunts, uncles, whomever. And that's kind of sad, but the book itself was so uplifting.
I have a nephew who fell in love on social media, and he saved all the back and forth communication, and he's there isn't the same distance in age between me and him as there was between Uncle Stanley and me, but I think people are longing for intimacy, and young people especially are really looking for meaning in their lives, and however, whatever medium they find it, it's not going to be putting an airmail stamp and saying fly it on it. I mean, it's going to be different, but I think that longing is still there.
Other comments or questions about, or anything? Yes.
I read it with a different purpose. I wish I could have just read it like without any history, but Ellen and I were in the No Vision together with Patsy, and I was trying to remember things. And so I was crying to see Ellen's letters to Uncle Stanley as well, to help me recreate the whole memory. But that is the limitation that I faced when reading it. Nevertheless, people talk about it being their evening comfort. I slept with that book for weeks, and if I couldn't sleep, I'd just pick it up and open it. So enjoyed it. Such a gift, Ellen, thank you.
Yes.
First, I'm going to preface by saying, if you see tears in my eyes, it is quite normal for Cat and Paula. But also, just very recently, my adult nieces and nephews are in their mid-30s to mid-40s, have embraced Tim and I's children who are teenagers, 18, 19, or 17, 18 years old. And Elena, our daughter, is going out to California for the first time on her own as an 18-year-old adult. So I'm kind of freaking out about that. She's gone from Atlanta to LA. And I thought about wanting to surprise her on her spring break. And my sisters, who are all 65 to 70, said absolutely not. They are all grandmas. I'm the only one of my siblings who is not. So when you speak about and read about the generational links, my kids know nothing about what a rotary phone is. Very rarely, even Elena, as good as she is, will pick up a pen and paper to write a letter anymore, which is okay. They taught me a few things. But the generational gap that I'm playing with my nieces and nephews is kind of living through my two teenagers. And my niece, who's 41, she'll be 41 in April, actually. She is ready to just take her little cousin by the hand when she gets there in LA and like show her whatever she can. And she reminded me, her name is Ginger Rose, and she reminded me that when she was 18, she flew out to Minneapolis to visit Tim and I. And I was the first aunt or person to get her a fake ID. And she says, I said, shh, Ginger, your mom is right there. And this is all over the phone. And my sister blurts out, payback is really good. So I have not read the book. I'm excited to, but I am so excited to read about generational links and how I can kind of exemplify that more in my family, because it's big in my family. Thank you.
As you're speaking, Kathy, I was looking this direction, and my friend Tom Choquette is here, and I remember him telling me about the letters he wrote to his daughter Rachel when she was engaged. It was going to be the gift on her wedding day, and putting into writing what a father was reflecting on as his only daughter was preparing for marriage, and having a little glimpse into that was precious too. So whatever your story is about people who want to reach out and connect, whatever that is, there's grace in it, and I hope that somehow this is encouragement to do that.
My husband and I met in high school, and we wrote letters back and forth to each other. He went to Purcell, I went to Oak and Reading, this school at Oak and Reading. And I'm not sure how it started, but I have saved those letters. He says you can get rid of those. But I wanted to go back to just a little quote from the book, from the intro, in fact. Our written words contained our love. And what is it about writing, I think, that opens our hearts? I love to write letters. I write them all the time. I like to write notes to people. But there's something different about saying the words and writing the words. And I just wanted to throw that out there if anybody has experienced that, because I think you had that idea in the intro. You talk to Uncle Stanley, but somehow the writing shared their hearts. They shared their hearts in a little different way. Does anybody want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about that too, as my kids grew up and they quit teaching cursive, and it drove me crazy, and just what that is and how it flows. And I've read stuff about, it flows through you, out of your brain. It's a form of expression physically, but I think it is more emotional if you're trying to express yourself. It's much more through the hand. And I will never believe that you can ever get that, I should never say never, I'm no better, on any kind of technology. I'm very, having raised a grandchild and watched another generation, it just breaks my heart constantly to see what they're missing out. And yeah, they're just so like, the impression or the falseness of relationship with the screen, I think, is just underrated. It's not communication to me. I mean, it is, you're expressing, but anyway, but I think there are scientists who put that in there, and I think it has to do with the physical and the intention and all that. So I'm looking forward to reading it. And
I would say that, the written word is very powerful, and it's long lasting. You say something and it's gone. Unless somebody remembers it or recorded it, but it's different if you're writing it down. I just was speaking earlier this week, can't call her my oldest friend because she's not my age older. She's my longest standing friend. We've been friends since we were 3 years old. She moved away out of the city when we were in 5th grade. And then she moved to Oregon when we were juniors in high school. And each time we thought we would never, ever see each other ever again. And we wrote. It's one of the few people that I actually spent a good deal of time writing, like almost weekly, so at least a couple times a month, letters back and forth we would write. And I didn't save any of the letters, which I kind of wish I had. It would have been quite interesting to look at writings from our youth. But it solidified our relationship. And we don't often see each other anymore, but we will get on the phone and talk for hours, without being, as if we're into each other's lives. But it all goes back to that foundation. I think of those letters she wrote.
I think what's interesting is, as a parent of young children and their generation is the power of written word is it's permanent. And what I have to, with social media and texting and all these things, what I have to keep reminding them is what you're writing is permanent. So you have to be very careful about the words that you choose and put out there, because once it's there, it's gonna be there forever. And so I think I think protect against the negative side of that, but also we're not promoting the positive side of that, of it is permanent, and writing those letters and expressing gratitude and wonderful positive things can be positive, permanent as well. That's probably the power of the pen, the word, and the written word.
I think that one thing that's uniquely different about written communication is that you are not necessarily like in that moment kind of anywhere but with yourself. Even though you are thinking of another who you have addressed that written communication to. And so some of the things that influence how we communicate, including nonverbal reactions that we get right in the moment, are not there when you're in that process of writing. It is only kind of what you've got going on in your head, your own inner monologue or dialogue, depending on who you are, that is really like shaping or forming that process. And I think that that's an element, I think, that changes the dynamic of that mode of communication versus other modes that we use.
Ready to move on to section 2, chemistry tests and retools. So this section that I'm going to read from is in the season of summer, and I've had a couple book clubs that have wanted me to come to visit them, and they all ask, why did you put teaching and mentoring in the season of summer? And that's a really good question. And the journey towards this book and how it was structured led me to learn more about memoir. This is a memoir, and to learn that a memoir is my story. I'm not writing a biography of my uncle. This is my story. And as I played with the 1,000 pages of letters, I began to see that particularly in my life, the springtime of my adult life was very evident in my uncle's letters. What he said to me was what he would say to a 18-year-old. Stop being homesick, stop feeling sorry for yourself, all those kind of directive things that wise older people can gift us with. But also at the end of his letters, there was lots about him reflecting on the end of his life. So those two seasons were obvious. Question was, okay, spring and winter, but what about summer and autumn? And it turned out that for me, summer, I always loved summer, and the actual season of summer. And so I put themes in the section on summer that had to do with the things I loved, the people I loved, the work I loved. It was kind of that season of joy, if you will. And then that kind of led into autumn being the season of fruitfulness and those loves coming to fruit. So that's why how teaching and mentoring got to be in summer. So this is on page 113. I'm going to read these two excerpts from letter number 60. And if you're curious about the dates of the letters, there are 200 letters and they spanned 18 years. So you can pretty much figure out what year the letters are by the number, because there were usually about 11 every year. So you can kind of figure that out. But this is when I'm still at Ursuline Academy. So I'm well into teaching. I think Shirley, I don't know, do you remember my first day of teaching?
I remember one day very distinctly.
Yeah. Well, I threw up on my first day of teaching. It was like, I was like, oh my God, I'm my teacher. So, and one you remember?
One I remember was April Fool's Day.
Oh.
Kids did something with chairs. I don't remember what they did with the chairs, but not happy.
Well, and there are people here who had me as a teacher. Diane, my first year teaching, so you somehow made it through and made it to your own chemistry teacher career, and others benefited from what I learned from Diane. But Uncle Stanley was pretty skeptical about why in the world was I teaching chemistry. He didn't get it. And if truth be told, there was no discernment that went into how did I get into chemistry. I don't know the answer exactly as to how I ended up being a chemistry teacher. I mean, I love science and all that, and I love teaching especially. But anyway, this is Uncle Stanley ranting about why are you a chemistry teacher? Only through the community will you become holy. Only through your relationship with people, and not through the retorts and Bunsen burners that are your special portion of the institution. I never do expect you to write a book someday entitled, I Found God Among the Bunsen Burners. A little heat there maybe, a little light, but not the light of lights, not the heat of heats. Unless, of course, you use all your daily clutter in that special way that gives honor and glory to God. And then later in that same letter, no matter how many retorts or even torts get between you and your pupils, it is you, the sister, the dedicated one, the loving sister, the understanding friend that will make their lives. Wherever you are placed, whatever you are called on to do by the voice that ultimately summons, the reason for your calling lies in the love and salvation of your peoples. And I remember reading that letter, and I remember it challenging me to reflect on why do I do what I do? Why did I say yes to this path, and what does it really mean? And it was also a delight that Uncle Stanley got to know some of my students here, especially the class of 1975, 1976, some in 1977, those years. He corresponded with them. I mean, they met him when he was here, and he ended up having a relationship with them that was separate from me, and so I knew that I couldn't get away with anything, So as I reflect on this theme on chemistry tests and retorts, I address you, the audience, and the others that we're grateful for the people who are with us remotely, and if they offer a chat comment or question, we'll be glad to entertain those too. So
I have a comment from Kelly Dehan.
Oh yeah, Kelly Dehan. Hi,
Yes.
Kelly.
She says, I think it is wonderful that you shared your Uncle Stanley with so many people, most notably Sister Cecilia, who was also teaching with you in the late 70s, and I enjoyed you both. I love the theme of your book. I used to write to my grandmother for years, and it left an indelible mark on me as well. Lastly, how fitting that you finished Lessons in Chemistry last night. Great book to read by the best chemistry teacher ever.
Thank you, Kelly. And my last section is going to be on Cecilia, so we're going to do a deep dive into Cecilia in a minute. So dear one, that's what I called the reader. Dear one, I attended the 90th birthday of the mother of two former students of mine on Saturday. I taught them both chemistry in the 1970s. One loved chemistry and became a pediatrician. One struggled with chemistry and is a physical therapist. They are both married with children in their 20s. One remembered the test I prepared for the periodic chart, a blank chart with descriptors of the qualities of fake elements. The puzzle captivated her, and she remembers it almost 50 years later. It so motivated her that she said she went off to Boston College and then medical school with the confidence that she would have what she needed. The other remembered me sitting with her one-on-one and patiently explaining the complex meanings of a mole. Her grown son listened as she remembered that high school experience and proclaimed that he loves moles, as his mother looked at me warmly. Having both girls reach out to me several years ago as their father was dying, and now their mother is celebrating her milestone birthday, is a precious gift. Confirmation that Uncle Stanley's almost obsession with getting me out of the lab and into more spiritual or pastoral ministry was unfounded. God works through us wherever we are, and weaves the secular and the sacred together in such lovely designs that we need not worry. My 7 years teaching chemistry equipped me to navigate a world where science is questioned, where creation-centered theology deepens our care for our earth, and where students who loved chemistry and students who hated chemistry can celebrate learning. Farewell, my friend, Ellen. P.S. And those of you who've read the books know that there's PSs, because Uncle Stanley always put PSs in his letters, so that's what it is. P.S. Write about one subject you had in high school that you loved or hated, and how that teacher shaped the person you became. So I invite Marilyn to talk about one of your teachers. What's a teacher that inspired you? You mentioned the Ursulines, but a particular one. Not necessarily an Ursuline.
Some of you may know or have known Sister Joan Roach, who unfortunately died a couple of years ago. I had Sister Joan for English my junior year, and she challenged us, especially with poetry. So she brought E.E. Cummings in to these juniors in high school who had never seen small letters. If any of you are familiar with his poetry, he writes in all small letters. And she would, take us through line by line. Once I remember, the assignment was go home and write a poem. And no one had ever challenged me in exactly that way in terms of writing. And then she went on to be the head of the newspaper, and I had many encounters with her. But definitely one of the contributors to my switching from French into English, which I love teaching both of them. How about any of you? Do you have a favorite teacher that you want to talk about, or somebody who would inspire you? Sister Ruth definitely inspired the French part. No question about that. Yay.
Oh, it's connected. I'm Diane Rose, and so I graduated in '74, and even though I was drawn to the science and math, where my challenges were definitely in the history and the English. Oh, I just really didn't think well in that area. But probably the English teacher that was dearest to my heart was Joe Lewis. And I say that because he just made it understandable for me, as someone who was not gifted in that area, that I could kind of say, okay, I think I get it. And that was helpful. That was really helpful. So I would say Joe.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Somewhere along the line, I took an education course, and I don't even remember where or what, but the whole gist of the course was, you might, if you were a teacher, what you taught somebody will long be forgotten before. The impact of you as a teacher and how you cared was really the important part. That's what this place was about, of caring and not worrying so much about content, I guess. So I think that's true of teachers I've had. I think of Ursuline. I still quote Mr. Libis in Dimensions of an Anticipatory Communiculture. It was so prophetic and for, of things that we did and learned there, and others. And just the fact, this sounds horrible, that, and I think of Phyllis Kemper too, and then I just think, look back, we were just such brats or idlers, and how cared about I felt. I was the person that Ellen had to teach one-on-one because I couldn't keep up in chemistry, even though I later became a nurse, and somehow passed. But so maybe that's my impression of myself, but the place I felt loved and cared for, and that was just always evident. So, by all the teachers, whether, and challenged.
The teachers that come to mind to me are actually the sisters. So I would say, well, Sister Ella was one of my favorite teachers. Sister Cecilia was one of my favorite teachers. Sister Carol was one of my favorite teachers. So, and then I would throw in Father Jack in that too. And what I think what's interesting to me, and it goes along with what you were saying here, is that it was less about the subject, because Sister Ella was really hard with chemistry. I had to study pretty hard. But it was that impact. It was that, that caring and that nurturing. And the presence of religion in daily life, not by instruction, but by example. And I
really, it's sad. There are now no more Ursula's teaching at Ursula, because I think that has changed the dynamic of it. Not that it's bad, it's just different. And so I would say that. The other thing I would say is, Sister Phyllis reminded me about something a few years back, and what I realized was how young you mostly were. Yeah, I mean, I thought you were like a generation away, and now I'm like, I'm not closer to age than you. I think, you know, I would have realized, yeah, you were like young 30-somethings.
20.
Yeah, I started when I was 22, and so Ellen's just a year older than I am. Yeah, we were really young. We were really young. Yeah, compared to.
Right, you were so much closer to the same thing. We did, my classmates and I talk about that when we talk about it all. It's also like, oh my gosh, they were just barely older than we were.
I have a thought I want to share with you. This is a St. Vivian's story, which is really where my vocation came from, because I had the Ursulines in grade school, not in high school, and was captivated by the uniqueness of each person. There were no two alike. That was what really appealed to me. But my 7th grade teacher said to us in 7th grade, and close your ears, you two, never let school interfere with your education. And I remember saying, will you say that again? Never let school interfere with your education. And he really meant it. The 7th graders who pretty much uniformly hated school, it's not, the fact that you hate school is not a cop-out. You are responsible, ultimately, for your education, and don't let your experience of school get in the way. And I've saved that my entire life. And I think education, and of course, St. Angela, who is the vision behind the Ursulines, did not teach in schools. There were no schools that she taught in. Some people kind of have this illusion of these little girls and Angela teaching schools. That wasn't the way it was. Education was a deep reflection on how do I engage with the world and discerning about what's my path. And she came to be associated with education kind of happenstance, with schools kind of happenstance. But she chose St. Ursula as the name of the order because St. Ursula was the patron saint of education, not schools. And I remember another story I'll tell you before we go on to Cecilia is when I was president of Chatfield College, I was going to be on a panel at a big conference in Brown County on domestic violence, and there were professional people from law enforcement, from the clergy, from education, from the law, lawyers and judges and whatever. It was a big deal thing. And I showed up and it was obvious that I had the time wrong. Went in the room and everybody was seated there and the panel was up there and there was an empty chair for me and they'd already started. And it was clear that something went wrong. And I went up there and sat down and they all looked at me like, okay, what are you gonna say? I had no context except that it being embarrassed that I was late. And I took a deep breath and I said, to this audience that was thinking about domestic violence, I said, education is the only gift that you give yourself or receive that no one can take away from you. People can take away your health, they can take away your money, they can take away your job, they can take away your car, your house, even your self-confidence. But they can't take away your education. And that's all I said, 2 sentences. And maybe 15 people came up to me. It was a standing room only group. They came up to me and said, "That's all we needed." 2 sentences, And I think when you write letters, to go back to what Tamara shared about it's only you, you're putting words down on paper that are limited. They're limited to this thought And every now and then, there's a sentence that lasts your whole life that you remember. And this section on Cecilia is one that it's the only letter in the book that was written to somebody other than me. And Uncle Stanley kind of took Cecilia under her wings when she was elected to leadership in our community. He knew her because we were on the faculty here together, and he would come and visit. And when she was elected to the role that Patsy has now, he promised that he would hold up her, he would pray for her like Aaron held up the arms of Moses. And he wrote to her every month and encouraged her. And his letters to her were not the same as his letters to me, and nor were her letters to him. But she saved all his letters, and about a month before she died, she was not sick that long, but about a month before she died, she gave me all her letters from him. And so for me, the story of his relationship with Cecilia and the fact that this letter to Cecilia was the last letter he wrote in his life. He died about 2 weeks after he wrote this letter. So she received his last letter. And there's something really precious about that for me, that he was so alive as he wrote this last letter to her, to welcome her to Alaska, where she was escaping after having torn down her mother house and was starting this new life. So I'm going to read this whole section because about Cecilia. Page 106, on Cecilia. I hope you had a happy time at Seal's Halloween party. How neat of her to think it up. We've been working too hard, all of us. Let's do some crazy things. You come as a skeleton, you a pirate, you a shepherd, and you as Jesse James. We will serve tea, he loved Hudipole, crackers and cheese. We will give each person a chance to do her thing. The crazier, the better. That sort of thing, eh? How human, how communitarian. And in a later letter, P.S. I think I must have to write to Seal too, to tell her, to let her know that I helped her to hold up her arms like Moses was held up as the battle raged. Dear one, J. Stanley Hale died August 26, 1985 in Worthington, Minnesota. The following letter, dated August 6, 1985, 20 days before he died, may have been the last one Uncle Stanley wrote to anyone. It was sent to Sister Cecilia, aka Seal Huber, who had just moved from St. Martin, Ohio to St. Mary's, Alaska, for a new ministry after serving as our Ursuline congregational minister for 6 years. She gave me all of his letters to her before she died in 2017. My dear Sister Cecilia, my history of the parish is all done, and the very first letter I'm going to write is to that self-flagellating nun who chooses to dash off to one of the dropping-off places of the world, where she can atone for all her sins of commission and omission after being in the seat of the Almighty. She will now live in an igloo, eat raw fish, blubber, and whatever the frozen sea has to offer. She will be as happy as all get out. I know, for her disposition is such that she will enjoy all others in exactly the same degree of longitude, if there is any longitude left in that isolated community. But I would like to see you in your caribou skin and fur pants. My picture of your benighted land comes from a book I read years and years ago called Kabluna. It was a book about a French newsman who chose to live among the Eskimos all one winter. The picture that comes to mind was that of two Eskimos and himself overcome in a foray by a violent snowstorm. They found shelter in an empty igloo built for that very purpose, where there were buried in the walls 2 dead frozen seals. They spread their blankets on raised ice seats and the two Eskimos attacked the seals with their teeth. They ate voraciously the raw food, spitting bones all over the floor and upsetting the stomach of the poor newsman by their gastronomical exploits. So, sister dear, should you allow yourself to become more primitive, at least use a knife, fork, and spoon. And don't ruin the carpet with fish bones. I talked to Ellen on Saturday, and Anne and Carol and Ellen are off to Wrightsville Beach today. They will have a wonderful time, and I would like to be with them. But I am lucky to get outdoors these days. Today it is too hot and humid, so I shelter myself behind the air conditioner. I must say I am feeling quite well today, as you may note from the tone of this letter. I hope that it is the beginning of my getting my strength back. My vision has been affected by a growing cataract that seems to have caught speed from all the radiation. No matter, so long as I can type and you can correct the mistakes I make. God bless you dearly, and a big welcome to the mission. I know you do what I do. Live by the line in the post Our Father prayer at Mass. Protect us from all anxiety as we wait in joyful hope for the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Much love, Uncle Stanley. Cecilia taught with me at Ursuline Academy and was adopted as one of the nieces when Uncle Stanley came to know her during his visits to Cincinnati. They wrote to each other periodically and were soulmates, always playfully sharing their love with the wider community. To know that his last letter was to her was a comfort. I wait in joyful hope to have a grand reunion with both of them, hoping that you too are living in joyful hope. A friend of friends, Ellen. Yes, draw a diagram of your friends and your friends' friends and your friends' friends' friends. Use stickers, if you have any, to celebrate all the connections.
I so appreciate the humor in that letter. And also, even though he was using humor, to me, he is encouraging her to go on this adventure and appreciate the change and the new challenge that is coming. And, but he does it again in such a loving way. And I felt the same way, you know, in several letters to you, that it was never specific, but maybe you were having some questions or struggles along the way, as we all do. And he just says, you know, go with it. Change is good. Embrace it. And to think of somebody his age having that kind of spirit too, I was very impressed by that. And a little push we all need sometimes. Any other comments or insights that you would like to share?
This past Labor Day, I had my 50th Jubilee and final vows, and my siblings came from North Carolina and brought their kids, and the book, that was when the book was, my publisher, when I learned about my cancer in April, my publisher advanced the book, sped it up by 2 months so that it would be ready for the Jubilee, and they decided, it was my publisher that said, let's have the Jubilee be the launching of the book. So it was all one event. Well, my nieces, I have 23 nieces and nephews, and several of them were there. Well, all through this, it's about the nieces, and my nieces hadn't read the book, and they came up to me. You know, they're like 30 and have 3 or 4 kids, and they came up to me and said, tell us what the nieces meant. And it was only the girls. The nephews were off somewhere else. And So I told him, I said, Uncle Stanley had a preference for the nieces. So anyway, it's through the book that his own nieces and I was a grandniece, and the people in the novitiate with me, like Robin and Phyllis and Mary. Those of you who know Mary Inkright, he was really close to Mary Inkright and Jill Leonard, those two, and he called them all the nieces. They all were the nieces.
He was enjoying those wonderful women also in his life. It's amazing. Did you want to close?
Yeah, I think I have an idea for a close.
Okay.
I have one comment from online.
Oh, one more comment from our online people.
This is
We're
from-
really glad you're here.
Sarah, I don't have a last name. I just want to say that I've enjoyed this evening, even though I could not attend due to sickness. Didn't want to share that with Sister Ellen. I am enjoying the book, especially the letters to Dear One. My favorite parts are the PSs that give me a little inspiration to do something in response. Thank you so much, Sister Ellen, for this gift.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for being with us in spirit and engaging with us. I'm going to read one more piece as a closer, and this is from Winter. We kind of avoid winter, and at this time of year, it's like we want it to be gone. But as I prepared the book, I wanted to have a reflection of each season, and this is the reflection for the season of winter, which we are still actually in. It's on page 191. In the season of winter. Winter is the season of witnessing. Witnessing what has been accomplished, witnessing the diminishment that comes with age, witnessing what matters in the end. The light is low, the nights are long, some days dawn frozen with grief and loss. Uncle Stanley in his last years would escape Minnesota winters to be with his sister Pat in Arizona. In winter, there is a being time for writing, reading, singing, connecting, dreaming, waiting. As I write this, a pandemic comes like a fierce winter for our world. It thrusts us into seeking shelter even as we cannot know what lies beyond the mist around us. Winter is a taking stock season. It lurks at family bedsides, national borders, and social and personal chasms that divide us from one another. This sacred season, like its sister seasons before it, invites a wrestling with mortality and faith. It promises transformation and fulfillment. I am in the winter season of my life most days now, and grateful for its flexibility and expansiveness and wisdom. With holy tenderness, winter deepens my attentiveness to those thin places where we briefly glimpse the threshold between life in this world and life in mystery. Uncle Stanley is there on the other side with so many of my dears, and that is enough. So thank you very much for coming, and thank you for the people who are online, and for people who may be watching this later at another time. So, and thanks so much, Chris, to Ursuline Academy for hosting this, and for all the help we had from Jackie and your staff. So.
Well, you know, I think about the theme, right? Generations and connections, and I look around this room, and it's like,
Here it is.
here it is.
Here we are.
So thank you so much.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Just a reminder that the book is being sold right outside, $20, either check or cash is fine. And it's also available at Orange Fraser Press, Frazer, and also on Amazon. And I would like to give my thanks to all of you for coming. It was great to see you all and appreciate your insights.